Ever felt like you have no idea where life is going? Like you're walking in circles with no clear direction? What if I told you that you're not lost at all? You're just climbing, and the reason it feels hard is because you're actually rising. You know that moment when life feels heavy, confusing, and uncertain, when every step feels like a guess. We call it being lost. But what if that feeling is a sign you're exactly where you're supposed to be? Perception of being lost vs. actual growth. Have you ever found yourself sitting in silence, staring at the ceiling, and thinking, what am I even doing with my life? That moment when every choice you've made feels like it's leading nowhere, and every step forward feels like walking deeper into confusion. It's a heavy feeling, isn't it? We call it being lost. But what if that entire perception is wrong? What if the feeling of being lost isn't a sign of failure, but a sign of growth? Think about how we define lost. When we say we're lost, it means we believe we've strayed from a path we were supposed to follow. It implies that there was a straight road, and now we're off it. But here's the truth: most people never consider life isn't a straight road. It never was. There's no single correct path laid out for you. No perfect map you're supposed to follow. Life is a climb, and climbing doesn't look like a straight line. It looks messy, uncertain, and unpredictable. When you feel lost, what's really happening? You're in unfamiliar territory. You're in a place where your old routines, old habits, and old definitions of success don't work anymore. That's why you feel disoriented, because you've outgrown what was familiar. This is not failure. This is expansion. The problem is, our minds are wired to crave clarity and control. When we can't see the whole route, we panic and assume we're off track. But in reality, the inability to see the destination clearly is a natural part of elevation. You don't see the summit when you're in the valley. You only start catching glimpses as you climb higher. Now let's dive deeper. Why do we associate uncertainty with being lost? Because as a society, we've been conditioned to equate progress with certainty. From school to work, we're trained to follow step-by-step instructions. Do this, then that. Stay on the path. But real growth doesn't follow those rules. Real growth demands you enter spaces where the ground feels shaky, where the map is unclear, where your comfort zone collapses. That's the only way you become someone new. Here's an analogy. Imagine hiking up a mountain. At the base, everything feels simple. You have clear views, you know where you're standing, and the road ahead looks manageable. But the higher you go, the fog sets in. Trees block the view. The trail gets rocky. You stop and think, am I going the wrong way? No, you're not going the wrong way. You're just going up. The discomfort, the confusion, the fatigue, they're not signs you're lost. They're proof you're climbing. And this is the problem with how we interpret that feeling of being lost. We treat it as a signal to stop, to turn around, or to settle for what's safe. But in reality, that feeling is a signal of transition. You're between who you were and who you're becoming. It's like being in the middle of a staircase. You're not at the bottom anymore, but you're not at the top either. That space in between feels awkward because it lacks certainty. But that's exactly where growth lies. When you start reframing that perception, everything changes. You stop asking, why am I so lost? And start asking, what am I learning on this climb? That shift in mindset doesn't erase the struggle, but it gives the struggle meaning. And meaning is everything. Because without it, you'll interpret every challenge as failure instead of progress. Here's something most people don't realize. Some of the most powerful moments in life happen in that space where you feel most uncertain. That's where creativity is born. That's where resilience is built. That's where the version of you that can handle more than you ever imagined starts to emerge. If you never felt lost, you'd never stretch beyond what's comfortable. You'd stay stuck in the same patterns forever. So, if you're feeling lost, that's not a red flag. That's a green light. It means you're not standing still. You're moving. You're evolving. The next time that voice inside says, you don't know what you're doing, remind yourself, nobody who's truly growing feels like they have everything figured out. Clarity comes later. First comes the climb. And the climb is supposed to feel like this: uncertain, uneasy, uncomfortable. Because that's how you know you're not where you were yesterday. You're higher. The invisible progress. One of the most frustrating experiences in life is working hard and seeing nothing change. You wake up every day, put in the effort, push yourself, and yet it feels like you're in the same place you started. No applause, no visible reward, no proof that what you're doing matters. That silence, that lack of evidence, it's heavy. It makes you wonder if any of this is worth it. And that's where most people give up. But here's what you need to understand: progress is almost always invisible before it becomes obvious. Think about nature for a second. When you plant a seed, do you see results the next day? No. You water it, care for it, protect it from harsh conditions, and for weeks, maybe even months, nothing happens above the surface. But does that mean nothing is happening? Absolutely not. Underneath the soil, roots are growing. The foundation is being built. The strength to support what's coming is taking shape where nobody can see it. That's what invisible progress looks like. Now apply this to your life. When you start something new, a skill, a business, a fitness journey, you're planting seeds. In the beginning, there's excitement because you imagine what the results will look like. But as time goes on and you don't see immediate changes, frustration creeps in. You look around and think, why am I not getting anywhere? But just because you can't see the progress doesn't mean it isn't happening. Some of the most important growth occurs out of sight. Here's the truth. Every small habit you repeat, every extra rep at the gym, every hour you spend learning, every failure you push through, they're all stacking up. You just can't measure it yet because you're still in the foundation phase. And the foundation always takes the longest because it has to hold the weight of everything you're building. Think about skyscrapers. The taller the building, the deeper the foundation. Before the structure rises above ground, workers spend months, sometimes years, digging and reinforcing what no one will ever see. People walking by wonder why nothing's happening, but the most critical work is happening underground. The same principle applies to personal growth. You might feel like you're stagnant, but in reality you're building roots. Those roots look like resilience, discipline, patience, mental strength, all qualities that can't be seen but become obvious later when you start to bloom. The danger is, because you don't see immediate results, you assume nothing is working. That's the illusion that kills progress. And let's talk about comparison for a moment, because that's where invisible progress feels most painful. You look at others and see their results, their wins, their highlights, and you think, they're moving so fast while I'm stuck. But you're comparing your underground phase to their visible phase. You're comparing your roots to their flowers. And here's the thing, every flower once lived underground too. Every success story you admire had a season of hidden effort, silent struggle, and thankless work. The difference is, they didn't quit when things were invisible. Here's a perspective shift. The silence you hate so much, it's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of preparation. When nothing seems to be happening, that's when the deepest growth is happening. Why? Because progress that comes too fast collapses just as fast. Think about trends, quick wins, shortcuts. They never last because they have no roots. But progress that is slow, steady, and invisible, that's the kind that endures. Imagine a staircase in a fog. You take one step, then another, but you can't see the top. You start wondering if you're even going higher. But if you stopped and looked down, you'd realize you're way above where you started. The problem is, you rarely look back because you're too focused on what you haven't reached yet. Invisible progress doesn't feel like progress because it lacks visible proof in the moment. But if you stay long enough, the fog lifts, the view appears, and then you realize every step mattered. Invisible progress also requires trust, the kind of trust most people struggle with. Trust that your efforts will compound, even when the evidence isn't there. Trust that the process works, even when you can't measure it day by day. That trust is what separates the people who achieve extraordinary things from the people who quit too soon. Because quitting doesn't happen when things are hard. It happens when things feel pointless. And invisible progress feels pointless if you don't understand that the unseen always comes before the seen. Your life might feel like that right now. Like you're showing up, doing the work, sacrificing, and yet everything looks the same. But what you can't see is the mental endurance you're building, the habits forming, the quiet shifts in identity that happen long before the external rewards show up. One day, all of that will surface at once, and everyone else will call it an overnight success. But you'll know it wasn't overnight. It was every invisible day that came before. Redefining success. From the time we're children, success is painted as something shiny, distant, and often measured by numbers, grades on a report card, trophies in a cabinet. Later, it becomes money in the bank, followers on a screen, job titles on a resume. Everything about success is presented as something external, something you can show others as proof that you've made it. And that's why so many people feel like failures, even when they're growing, because they're chasing a definition that was never theirs to begin with. Redefining success starts with asking a question most people never think to ask. Who told me what success is supposed to look like? Was it your parents, your teachers, your friends, or the endless highlight reels on social media? Most of the time, the answer is all of them. You were handed an image of success before you even had the chance to decide what mattered to you. And so you run toward it blindly, thinking that if you can just hit that milestone, buy that house, land that job, reach that number, you'll finally feel complete. But the truth is, the traditional definition of success leaves people feeling empty because it's based on arrival, not alignment. What does that mean? It means we've been taught that success is a destination, a point you reach where everything feels perfect. The problem is, life doesn't work like that. The moment you hit a goal, your mind immediately sets another one. You thought success was making 6 figures, but the second you do, you want 7. You thought success was reaching 1,000 followers, then you want 10,000. The finish line keeps moving because success based on outcomes is an endless chase. That's why so many successful people still feel unfulfilled. They achieved everything they were told to want, but none of it feels like enough. So what's the alternative? Redefining success as a process, not a point. Seeing it not as a single mountain to conquer, but as the act of climbing itself. Real success isn't about how fast you reach the top. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't quit halfway. It's about growth, effort, and resilience, not just results. When you adopt this mindset, something incredible happens. You stop living in a constant state of not there yet, Instead, you find meaning in every step. Think about an artist. If success for them is only about selling a masterpiece, they'll feel like a failure every day until that happens. But if success means showing up to create, improving their craft, and expressing what matters to them, then success is happening daily. Even when no one's watching, that shift takes the pressure off chasing applause and puts the focus back on doing the work that matters to you. Another key part of redefining success is detaching it from comparison. We live in a world where it's easier than ever to see what everyone else is doing, and because we see their highlights without their struggles, we start believing their path is the standard. But here's the reality: success has no universal template. What feels like winning to one person might feel like failure to another. For someone, success might be building a billion-dollar company. For someone else, it might be working a job they love and having time for family. Both are valid, both are powerful, and neither should be judged by the other's definition. If your version of success is based on someone else's life, you'll spend yours trying to live a story that isn't yours. That's why the most important question you can ask is, what does success look like for me? Maybe it's freedom over your time. Maybe it's impact, health, creativity, or stability. Whatever it is, it has to align with your values, not society's scoreboard. Because when success is rooted in alignment, every step feels worthwhile, even if no one else understands it. One of the biggest misconceptions about success is that it always has to be big, loud, and impressive. But some of the most meaningful versions of success are quiet. Waking up without dread, feeling proud of who you are becoming, having peace of mind at the end of the day. Those don't make for flashy Instagram posts, but they are victories that matter far more than external validation. There's another piece to this: success as seasons. What feels like success in your 20s might feel different in your 40s, and that's okay. The definition is supposed to evolve as you do. The problem is when people lock themselves into an outdated idea of success and force themselves to chase it long after it stopped making sense for who they've become. Redefining success means giving yourself permission to update the definition whenever life changes, and it will. When you understand this, failure takes on a different meaning too. Because if success is the climb, then failure isn't falling short of the summit. It's refusing to take the next step. As long as you're moving, learning, and staying true to what matters to you, you're succeeding. That's a radically different way of seeing life than the one most people were taught. And it's the only way to feel fulfilled while you're still in motion, instead of waiting for some distant moment to validate your existence. Trust the climb. There's a strange paradox about climbing. Whether it's an actual mountain or the metaphorical climb of life, the higher you go, the less you can see. At the base, everything feels clear. You know where you started, you can see the trail ahead, and the horizon stretches out like a promise. But as soon as you begin to ascend, the path twists, the fog thickens, and suddenly, you feel disoriented. You question whether you're on the right trail, whether the summit even exists, and whether you're strong enough to get there. That's when trust becomes everything. Not blind hope, but trust in the process, trust in yourself, and trust that the climb is shaping you in ways you can't yet measure. Most people think trust is something you give to others. But when it comes to growth, trust is something you have to give yourself. And that's harder than it sounds. Because when you're in the middle of the climb, there are no guarantees. No signposts telling you how close you are, no applause from the crowd, no scoreboard confirming your progress. All you have is the effort you've put in so far, and the belief that it's taking you somewhere meaningful. That belief is what keeps you moving when everything in you wants to quit. Why is trust so important in the climb? Because doubt will show up every single day. Doubt whispers that maybe you're wasting your time, that maybe the top isn't worth it, that maybe you're just not good enough. And the longer the journey feels, the louder those whispers become. Without trust, doubt wins. Without athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, leaders, they all have one thing in common. They trusted the climb when it felt impossible. They trusted that the long nights of practice, the countless failures, the lonely moments of doubt, were all pieces of something bigger. And here's the irony. When they finally reached the top, they realized the climb mattered more than the summit. Because the climb is where they became who they needed to be. Trusting the climb also means accepting that struggle is not a sign you're failing. Struggle is the proof that you're doing something worth doing. If the path were easy, it wouldn't lead anywhere worth going. The resistance you feel isn't a wall. It's the weight that builds your strength. Every time you push through that weight, you're becoming the version of yourself capable of handling the view at the top. Without the climb, you'd never be ready for what's waiting for you. But here's where most people break. They confuse uncertainty with misdirection. Just because you can't see the whole path doesn't mean you're on the wrong one. Mountains aren't climbed with a clear view from start to finish. They're climbed by trusting the next step, and then the one after that. That's what makes the climb powerful. It forces you to live in the moment, to focus on what you can control instead of obsessing over what you can't. This is where faith in the process comes in. Process is everything. Results will come, but the process is what carries you through the silence, the setbacks, the seasons where nothing seems to be happening. If you only trust when you're winning, you'll quit long before you reach the top. Real trust shows up in the middle, in the mess, when the outcome is a distant rumor and the work feels endless. That's when trust becomes a choice you make over and over, even when it's the hardest thing to do. And then there's trust in yourself, a concept so many people struggle with, because they've spent years doubting their own capabilities. Trusting yourself doesn't mean believing you'll never fail. It means believing you'll figure it out when you do. It means knowing that no matter how many times you stumble on this climb, you'll stand back up and keep moving. That self-trust is your anchor when the trail disappears and the fog closes in. Without it, every challenge feels like a reason to turn around. With it, every challenge becomes a reason to keep going. The truth is, you don't need the entire map to keep moving. You just need to trust the step you're taking, because the summit isn't reached in a single leap. It's reached in countless small steps that felt insignificant at the time. Trust turns those steps into momentum. Trust turns the climb into transformation. And trust, more than anything else, is what separates those who make it to the top from those who give up halfway. Perspective shift. Everything in life begins with perspective. The way you see the world determines how you respond to it, and the way you interpret your situation shapes what you believe is possible for you. When you feel lost, when life feels heavy and unclear, the first instinct is to assume something is wrong. You think you've taken the wrong turn, or that you're stuck in a place you were never meant to be. That perspective alone creates a sense of panic and failure, and it clouds everything else. But what if that interpretation is completely wrong? What if the problem isn't your position, but your perception of it? Here's the truth. Feeling lost is often just a symptom of being in transition. You're no longer the person you were, but you haven't yet become the person you're becoming. That space in between feels uncertain because it's unfamiliar, not because it's wrong. The problem is that most people look at uncertainty and label it as failure. They believe clarity equals progress, so when clarity disappears, they assume progress has stopped. But the opposite is true. The reason the path feels blurry is because you're in new territory. You're climbing higher than you've ever been before, and that requires a different way of seeing things. Perspective is powerful because it turns the same experience into two completely different realities. Take two people on the same mountain. One looks at the steep incline and says, "This is too hard, I'll never make it." The other looks at the same climb and says, "This is proof I'm getting closer to something worth reaching." Same mountain, same conditions, different mindset. And that mindset changes everything. When you tell yourself you're lost, your brain starts searching for signs that confirm it. Every challenge becomes evidence that you're on the wrong path. Every delay feels like proof that you should turn back. But if you shift your perspective and start saying, "This is what growth feels like. This is what climbing feels like," then the same struggle becomes validation, not condemnation. The pain in your legs isn't a signal to stop. It's a sign you're getting stronger. The fog on the trail isn't a warning you're lost. It's a reminder that you're in higher altitudes now, places you weren't before. One of the most important perspective shifts you can make is understanding that discomfort doesn't mean danger. In fact, discomfort is often the greatest sign of progress. But because we've been conditioned to seek comfort and control, we interpret discomfort as something negative. We think, if this feels hard, it must be wrong. That belief kills dreams. Growth is supposed to feel hard. Climbing is supposed to burn. The heaviness in the journey is what gives you strength for the summit. So instead of thinking, "I'm lost because this is difficult," start thinking, "This is difficult because I'm ascending." That small shift in perspective can keep you moving when everything in you wants to quit. Another layer to perspective is how we define setbacks. Most people see setbacks as signs they're going backward. But what if setbacks are simply part of the terrain? Every climb has dips, detours, and points where you have to pause. That doesn't mean you've lost progress. It means you're navigating real growth. Perspective transforms a setback from an obstacle into an opportunity to build resilience. Without that shift, every delay feels like the end of the journey. Perspective also determines whether you live in gratitude or resentment during the climb. When you're focused only on the summit, every moment feels like a punishment until you get there. You rush through life, missing the view, missing the lessons, missing the version of yourself that's being shaped in the process. But when you shift perspective and realize that the climb itself is where the magic happens, everything changes. Suddenly, you see value in the struggle, meaning in the waiting, and beauty in the steps that don't look glamorous from the outside. Here's the irony: the climb will always feel like chaos if you expect it to look like a straight path. The moment you accept that uncertainty is normal and struggle is part of the design, you stop fighting the process. Perspective doesn't erase the difficulty, but it changes how you experience it. It takes you from, "Why is this happening to me?" to, "This is happening for me." That shift turns frustration into fuel. It turns doubt into determination. And then there's the perspective of time. Most people expect immediate results, and when they don't see them, they assume they're lost. But what if the lack of instant results is just the reality of meaningful growth? The perspective of patience is rare, but it's essential. Because every great climb takes time, and the longer it takes, the more it builds you into someone capable of holding what's waiting at the top. The most liberating perspective shift of all is this: you're not lost. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're climbing. And the reason it feels like this, the reason it feels uncertain, exhausting, and unclear, is because you're going higher than before. That's what growth feels like. That's what transformation looks like before it becomes obvious. The climb is not a punishment. It's the privilege that shapes you into someone who can stand on the summit and understand what it took to get there.